woman was a 10 out of 10. Just look at her. Jean Tierney. She was an old Hollywood stage and film actress. Someone in my comments asked me to do a video about her. I can't find the comment, but here it is. And I'm going to try to jam pack in as many photos as I can. Jean was born on November 19th, 1920 in Brooklyn, New York. She was a Scorpio. Her family had money. She was privileged. She grew up. She debuted at the age of 17. But Jean did not want to be a society girl. She wanted to be an actress. So her daddy was like, "You're gonna act." She's doing well on Broadway, and Columbia Pictures offers her a contract. Around this time, Howard Hughes, who always makes an appearance in these videos, tried to seduce her, and she was like, "No, thank you." She was initially supposed to be in National Velvet. Things didn't work out. Elizabeth Taylor's in it. She goes back to Broadway, and then Daryl Zanuck of 20th Century Fox notices her, and they sign her. She was working, she was booked and busy, and then she was in probably her most notable film, Laura, and she was nominated for Best Actress Award. When Jean was 20 years old, she fell in love with designer Oleg Cassini, and they eloped because her parents didn't approve. Together, Jean and Oleg had two daughters, Antoinette Daria Cassini and Christina Tina Cassini. I couldn't find any pictures of Daria. When Jean was pregnant with Daria, she contracted rubella, and her daughter was born premature, weighing only 3 pounds 2 ounces. Because of this, Daria was born blind, deaf, and had developmental issues, so she was institutionalized her entire life. Jean's old friend Howard Hughes footed the bill for this. 5 years later, Jean had daughter Christina, and all of these photos are pictures of Tina. After 5 years of marriage, Jean and Oleg separated, and then they reconciled and broke up again and got back together, and they finally divorced in 1952. While they were separated, Jean was seeing other people. It was reported she was seeing Kirk Douglas, and she had one relationship in particular with John F. Kennedy, and they were hot and heavy. But he couldn't be with her because he had goals, baby. He was running for office, and he couldn't be with someone who was already married. As we know, a few years later, he married Jacqueline Bouvier. Ironically, Cassini designed some of Jackie's most iconic looks. Jackie knew how to dress. Cassini designed her dresses and some suits. After Jean's divorce was finalized in 1952, she started dating Prince Ali Khan, who was now just divorcing Rita Hayworth. In fact, they were engaged, but his father didn't approve, so they broke up. Jean had been struggling with her mental health for many years, and she had bouts of manic depression. She had problems concentrating, which caused issues on the film sets, so she dropped out of a movie called Mogambo. The movie starred Humphrey Bogart, Ava Gardner, and she was replaced by Grace Kelly, who was later engaged to Cassini. Here's Grace in a dress that Oleg designed. She sought treatment from psychiatrists, and they hospitalized her, and they gave her shock therapy treatments. In 1957, she attempted to unalive herself, so her family put her in a hospital. They would wrap her in ice to control her mood swings. No comment. But she was going through therapy, and then they recommended that she take a regular job. So Jean worked at a dress shop anonymously, and she was a sales clerk. It's like TMZ 1950 something. 1958, she announced she was back in Hollywood and she was ready to work again. Around the same time, she married W. Howard Lee. He was a Texas oil man, and he was just recently divorced from Hedy Lamarr. She moved to Texas, then she lived in Florida, and she stayed married to him until he passed away in 1981. Jean wrote a book about her life and her mental health struggles. In 1991, Jean passed away from emphysema. She was a lifelong smoker, and she was 70 years old, just shy of her 71st birthday. What about her daughters? So Daria passed away at the age of 66 in 2010. I wasn't able to find too much about her daughter, Christina. I know she was inspiration behind the Tina Cassini doll. As you can see, it says designed by Oleg Cassini. Apparently, these dolls are very rare to find, but I do know that when Oleg passed away at the age of 92, he was worth $55 million. But guess what? He had a secret wife. They had been married for 30 years. He would introduce her as his assistant. Her name was Marianne, and when he passed, Marianne and Christina fought over his estate. And sadly, Christina passed away in 2015 from ovarian cancer, and she was penniless. Jean was breathtaking, and I didn't really know that much about her, so thank you to the person who asked me to make this video.
Bad interactions between fans and celebrities aren't a rare occurrence, but Gene Tierney might have had one of the worst of all time. In the 1940s, the Hollywood Canteen was opened as a venue to entertain enlisted men and women on their way to fight in World War II. In 1941, Gene Tierney eloped with costume and fashion designer Oleg Cassini. She was planning to go meet him in Kansas at Fort Riley after he joined the Coast Guard. But before she left, she agreed to appear at the Hollywood Canteen. At the time, she was pregnant with their first child. There were hundreds of people at the canteen, and in her autobiography, she says she had no reason to remember any particular event of the night. But a few days later, she was covered in red spots, and her doctor diagnosed her with the German measles. He told her she would have to postpone travel, but it would all be over in a week. Months later, when her daughter Daria was born, she was premature and only weighed 2.5 pounds. Very quickly, they began to notice problems with Daria's sight and hearing. Daria was deaf, partially blind, and had brain damage. Around this time, newspapers began reporting a link between German measles and birth defects. Around a year after Daria's birth, Gene was approached by a woman at a party in Los Angeles. She said she was in the women's branch of the Marines and asked if Gene remembered her from the Hollywood Canteen. Gene said that she didn't, and the woman asked, "Did you happen to catch the German measles after that night?" She went on to say, "Almost the whole camp was down with the German measles. I broke quarantine to come to the canteen and meet the stars. Everyone said I shouldn't, but I had to go. You were my favorite." Gene said she just stood there and realized there was no reason to share what had happened. She walked away and said she never cared if she was anyone's favorite actress ever again.
Happy birthday, Gene Tierney. Blue-blooded Tierney made her Broadway debut in 1938. Soon after, she was discovered by Daryl Zanuck and signed with 20th Century Fox. Tierney appeared in featured parts until 1943, when she received top billing for Heaven Can Wait. She then starred in her two most iconic films, 1944's Laura and 1945's Leave Her to Heaven, which earned Tierney an Oscar nomination for Best Actress. Tierney was a movie star and was considered one of 1940's most beautiful leading ladies. She then starred in films like Dragonwyck, The Razor's Edge, The Ghost of Mrs. Muir, and Where the Sidewalk Ends. Sadly, her personal life was rocky. Her first husband was Playboy designer Oleg Cassini, and one of their two daughters was mentally disabled. She struggled with bipolar disorder, attempted suicide in 1957, and was even admitted to a psychiatric facility where soon after she became an outspoken opponent of shock therapy. She made a brief comeback in the 60s but retired soon after. Gene Tierney passed away in 1991 at the age of 70.